Hello and welcome. I'm Susan Barashai, founder of C Admissions, and today we're going to break down Wharton TBD discussion. So that is Wharton's interview style for those who are applying in round 2 of this year. We're going to look at what it's evaluating, where candidates fail, and why preparation is exceptionally important to ace this interview. So once February 20th rolls around, you are going to get the decision. And hopefully in that decision, there's going to be a Wharton interview invite. You are oftentimes, applicants are ready to talk about their leadership experiences, about their career goals, why Wharton. But it's really important to note that the Wharton interview does not ask any of those things. The team-based discussion, or TBD for short, puts you in a virtual room with 4 to 5 other candidates, gives you a business case to solve together, and watches how you work. In the actual TBD, there's no interviewer asking you any questions, no opportunity to develop prepared stories from your past experience. And it's really important that you make sure that you are showing up there fully prepared, because Wharton is evaluating whether you're comfortable. Wharton actually isn't evaluating whether you're comfortable in the group. They're evaluating whether the way you naturally collaborate aligns with how they want their students to work together. And there's often a very significant gap between those two different things that it's really difficult to see on your own, because the way you work in teams, it's the way you have always worked in teams. And this may be a nuanced difference. So Wharton is the only top MBA program using the team-based discussion format for interview. And this is quite deliberate. Traditional interviews tell them whether you can tell a good story about your leadership, about your experiences, but the TBD shows them whether you can actually lead in a way that, in this case, Wharton actually values. In a standard interview, you control the narrative. You practice your stories, anticipated questions, prepared answers for those questions, but the TBD removes all of your individual control. You are working in real time with people you have never met before, making split-second decisions about when to speak and when to listen. What emerges in this interview style is how you'll actually behave in Wharton's team-intense environment, in learning teams, in group projects, in collaborative problem solving within the program. Wharton is watching whether you make space for others or fill all available space yourself, whether you listen to build on ideas or listen to find openings to insert your own perspective, whether your contributions move the group forward or just demonstrate individual competence. These qualities determine whether you'll thrive in Wharton's culture, and they're exactly what a lot of candidates don't necessarily prepare for, because they don't understand what actually is being evaluated in the TBD, and we're going to talk through that today. So here's what happens in the actual TBD. You receive the prompt with your interview invite. This year, Wharton asked teams to propose a new leadership intensive program for their MBA class or MBA students. This is experiential, team-based, $25,000 budget, specific learning outcomes prompt. More of that can be found on our actual blog that we have covered on this particular topic. So you are going to join a video call with 4 to 5 other candidates that you have not met before. This is random assignment. You can be in rooms with consultants, tech professionals, entrepreneurs, engineers, nonprofit, like people who are in the nonprofit space. And you have essentially 25 minutes to discuss and work towards a tangible outcome. 5 minutes to actually prepare or present your final deliverable to the interviewer or moderator. Then you have a 10-minute one-on-one with either someone from admissions or current students who are trained to conduct these kinds of interviews. This session, the 10-minute, is a conversation about your interests at Wharton, but you also have more space to ask additional questions. Most candidates focus all their preparation on the 10-minute interview and treat the TBD as something to just show up naturally or prepare a little bit of a kind of idea of what they want to do. The TBD is where real evaluation happens beyond just what you are preparing in terms of your pitch. You are being essentially evaluated from the moment discussion begins. How you listen matters, how you respond to others' ideas matter, whether you create space for quieter participants matter, how you handle disagreements also matters. The moderator, it's only there to listen. They are not going to intervene no matter what happens. There is literally no structure in terms of how you conduct the conversation beyond the prompt. The team, you and the other individuals in the room are self-organized. You decide how you're going to show up, how you're going to participate as a collective. And how you do that reveals a lot to Wharton in terms of how you're going to show up in the Wharton community. So this component, the evaluation component, is oftentimes where candidates really do struggle and don't exactly know what happened. Most applicants think they need to demonstrate individual competence. They focus on making their ideas heard or contributing substantively to the conversation, demonstrating a lot of value. While that instinct isn't wrong, it's also incomplete. Wharton isn't necessarily looking for the person with the best ideas. They're looking for people who make teams better. I worked with a consultant who was extremely accomplished, brilliant strategic thinker, comfortable in groups, obviously as a consultant. And when we conducted the team-based simulation that we offer at SIA, I watched him do exactly what made him successful in consulting. He identified the core problem quickly, structured the conversation, drove towards a solution efficiently. If we hadn't discussed, he would have been rejected by Wharton. Why? Because his instinct was to lead by directing rather than building. He listened to the response of people, but not necessarily to integrate. And when someone raised a complicating perspective, he acknowledged it briefly and redirected back to the approach that they had agreed upon. He was not aggressive or dismissive, of course, but this is just how he operated in this high performing team that he was in consulting. But Wharton in this situation wouldn't have seen collaboration. They would have seen someone who coexists with the team while pursuing his own agenda. And that was his blind spot. We wouldn't have noticed that if we've done one-on-one sessions only, because we would not have been able to see them in a group setting. You can't also yourself see how you actually show up because your normal is your normal. What feels effective collaboration might read as dominance to Wharton. What feels like valuable contribution might look like you're not making space for other people. Wharton evaluates whether you strengthen team outcomes or just achieve outcomes while working alongside a team. Most candidates can't distinguish between those without external feedback or someone externally being able to see it and be able to give that feedback to them. So let's talk about specific failure patterns that we see consistently. One, talking too much. Candidates who are taking a lot of airtime, respond to every point, feel responsible for keeping conversation moving. They're often the most engaged participant, but they create a dynamic where other voices get crowded out. The opposite end, talking too little. Thoughtful, listening carefully, waiting for the right moment to contribute something valuable. But sometimes the moment never comes, and by the time they are ready, the conversation has moved on. Or also individuals who are treating the TBD like a debate. Someone proposes an idea, they immediately identify weaknesses and explain why a different approach works better. They're demonstrating critical thinking, but Wharton sees someone who tears down rather than is building with a team. Most subtly is missing opportunities to build on others' thinking. These are candidates who contribute valuable ideas, participate actively, but their contribution exists in parallel rather than integrating. Instead of building on that, they pivot their own ideas about leadership and about leadership in terms of how they're showing up. Every single one of these patterns feels normal to the person doing it. The consultant who dominates doesn't experience himself as dominating. He's keeping the team on track. The person who talks too little doesn't realize they're disappearing. They're being strategic. You need external perspectives to see how you actually show up, not how you think you show up, but how others experience your collaboration style. That's not something you can self-assess. It has to be something you are going to receive feedback from someone else. And you can do this even in your own team environment, asking other individuals about giving you feedback in terms of how you show up in an environment. And that can give you a good sense of where you are. So let's talk about how this prompt surfaces collaboration dynamics. The leadership intensive seems straightforward. Design a program, manage a budget, articulate outcomes. Most candidates immediately think about the content, what experiences would be valuable, what theme, what outdoor adventure or strategic simulation would make the most sense. You need to engage with the prompt. But Wharton isn't primarily interested in whether your team proposes the perfect program. They're watching how you work together to get any proposal at all. Within the first few minutes, you'll see divergence. Someone suggests wilderness survival focus on resilience. Someone else proposes social impact in underserved communities. Others want conflict resolution through mediation training. All potentially good ideas, but completely different directions from one another. This is where Wharton sees who you are. Do you advocate hard for your ideas? Immediately find common ground? Zoom out and suggest a decision framework first? Go quiet because you're not sure how to navigate disagreement? None of this is inherently right or wrong. What matters is whether you approach whether your approach helps the team move towards an integrated outcomes or creates fragmentation in this dynamic. Sometimes advocating strongly is exactly what the team needs. Sometimes it derails collaborations. The difference depends obviously on context, how others are showing up, whether the conversation needs to go in one direction or another. You can't necessarily prepare a formula. Effective collaboration requires reading the room in real time, understanding what the team needs, and having self-awareness to adjust your instincts when they're not serving your collective goals. Most candidates don't have the situational awareness to be able to do this, not because they're bad at teamwork, but because they've never had to develop it in the work experiences that they've had to date. So let's talk about preparation. Most candidates learn about the TBD and think about times they've worked in groups. They remind themselves to be collaborative, they review teamwork principles, They tell themselves to stay calm and engaged during the entire process. Then when they show up, operate exactly how they always operate and wonder why they don't get admitted despite strong applications. You can't necessarily prepare for the TBD like traditional interviews. There's no stories to refine. You can't decide positioning in advance because team dynamics emerges organically while you're there based on who's in your group. And you don't know who's on your group until you show up to the actual interview. Effective preparation means understanding what collaboration means to Wharton and in Wharton's framework. It's not just about being agreeable or being nice or being accommodating. It's definitely not about avoiding conflict or making sure everyone speaks. Wharton looks for people who strengthen team thinking, who hold their own perspective while genuinely integrating other people's ideas, who create conditions for teams to be smarter together than any individual alone. That's a specific competency most candidates haven't explicitly developed and need this time to make sure that they're doing it effectively. You need external observation on how you actually show up, not how you think you show up, but how others experience you, as I mentioned earlier. I can't tell you how many candidates describe themselves as collaborative team players, then I watch them in our simulation and see something completely different. Not because they're lying, they genuinely cannot see their patterns. The consultant I mentioned, when we debriefed, he was shocked. He thought he'd been collaborative, made space for others, but he had no idea he was driving conversation in a way that marginalized other perspective. The awareness only comes from having someone outside observe and name what Wharton would be seeing and be able to give you that feedback, and for you to have ample time to actually integrate that into your preparation. You need practice adjusting instinctive patterns in real time because you as an individual have been accustomed to doing things in a certain way, and that's normal. Even after understanding your blind spots, changing behaviors under pressure requires repetition. You need new muscle memory for team interaction. That doesn't happen through intellectual understanding, right? It doesn't happen through theory. It requires doing it, getting feedback, adjusting, doing it again. And that's how you prepare for Wharton. So let's talk about what we see with candidates on TBD preparation. Most come to us worried. They read about the format, understand it's different, of course. They're anxious about being evaluated in front of other candidates, not knowing what to expect, making mistakes they can't recover from because you only get one chance. That worry is totally understandable. When we run the simulation, candidates definitely see themselves in action. What emerges is almost always surprising. The person who thought they were collaborative realized they've been dominating. The thoughtful person realized they've been invisible. The person building on ideas realizes they've been pivoting away from those ideas. This isn't about telling people they're bad at teamwork. It's showing the gap between self-perception and external perception. Once they see the gap, preparation becomes more targeted and you know exactly what you need to do. We develop very specific awareness. Make sure you listen. But when someone introduces complexity you haven't considered, your instinct is to acknowledge briefly, then redirect to your framework. Wharton reads that as dismissive, not integrative. Or you're waiting for complete ideas before speaking, but in team discussion, partial thoughts others can build on are more valuable than fully formed contributions that arrive too late and you can't necessarily help the team. These insights don't come from reading teamwork principles or self-reflection. You need someone watching who understands what Wharton looks for and can name specifically what needs to change in your preparation. Then you need to practice multiple simulation rounds, as many as you can, focusing on different team dynamic aspects. Candidates, try approaches, see what works, feel what's effective collaboration, and then continue to practice. By the time they're preparing for the actual TBD, they're not worried. They know that what Wharton evaluates, they know the blind spots, and have strategic approaches to managing them. That's the difference between a winning applicant at Wharton and someone who is strategic, someone who is approaching it essentially just by winging it. So if you're interviewing to Wharton, we're essentially 1 month away until that those decisions come out. And here's the takeaway that I suggest you get from this session. The TBD is not something you prepare for alone. This isn't about reading teamwork articles or reviewing case frameworks or having a simulation with a friend. This is about seeing yourself as others see you, identifying gaps between your instincts and Wharton's criteria, and developing real-time awareness to adjust collaboration patterns under pressure. No matter how much you're prepared, you will feel anxious the day of the actual interview. But this requires, in terms of preparing, external observation, structured simulation, recreating the actual environment so you can really see how you're performing. Then you need enough practice time that the adjustments that you need to make become more natural before the interview. And I haven't mentioned it earlier, but once interview invites come out, everyone has maximum 2 weeks to complete their interview. So there's no 3-week time frame. You have maximum of 2 weeks, and everyone tries to book their sessions at the latest possible. You need this time to actually prepare. So our Wharton TBD simulation provides that replica of what the TBD would look like live. This is a live simulation with other candidates. We observe your collaboration patterns in real time. We give specific actionable feedback about what Wharton would see and what needs to change. And you get to practice rounds to try to approach and internalize the adjustment that you need to make. Most importantly, you are going to develop the self-awareness that makes you effective in a TBD, and also in the actual team-intensive environment that Wharton has built their entire program around. Round 2 deadlines are coming. So if you're planning to, round 2 interview invites are coming. So if you have applied to Wharton, start this preparation now. I know it's early, but we have the blog with the actual prompt. You can start preparing that. You can start seeing yourself in a simulation environment. And you definitely want to give yourself ample time to integrate this before you actually show up to your interview. If you are interested in being on our wait list for the Wharton TBD simulation, that only opens the day the interview goes out, because we do only accept individuals who have been invited to interview at Wharton. So join the wait list, or you can also, of course, have one-on-one interview preparation consultations that we can do those beforehand, but the simulation process only opens once interviews are out. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. So let us move into particular questions that you guys may have. If you are joining us in any one of the platforms, so LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, please write your questions in the comments, and we'll be able to address them here. As a reminder, for those who are applying next year, for those who are in the interview process this year, I will be having our next live session next week is going to be directly focused on career, those individuals who are transitioning. Particularly in this case, we're segmenting finance to tech career changes, and we're going to talk about some of the schools that you should be considering for that. So I invite you to register for that event, ask your questions in advance. That helps us create the content that is going to be most relevant to you. So even if you don't join us live, you have an opportunity to watch the replay and have your question answered directly. Okay, and also in about an hour and a half at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be joining GMAT Club on their YouTube channel to answer any questions. So you feel free to join me there. Okay, let's start with the first question that has come through the registration form. What specific behaviors are AdCom members actually scoring during the team-based discussion? So all of the components that I mentioned earlier, those are evaluation criteria. So we talked about leadership, we talked about how you are helping the individual team or the team as a collective move forward and be better as a group, right? You, again, don't have to come in with the best idea. Your idea does not need to be picked to be admitted to Wharton. So I really do not want anyone that is listening to be fixated on that. If you are the person who is fixated on having their idea picked, I can guarantee that you will not get in. That is how important that component is. You have to let go, right? You have to be detached from the idea. You have to be attached to how the team collectively comes to a solution that is most effective. So how you show up, how you integrate other people's perspectives. So integrate, not just acknowledge, right? It's really important how you invite other individuals to be part of the team in the discussion. All of those are rubrics of evaluation the AdCom looks at as they're watching, essentially, your performance during the team-based discussion. Okay. What role does facilitation play versus contribution in strong performance? They're equally important in the actual interview. You don't have to play all of them, but what comes most naturally to you, that is going to help you a bit. So if you are a facilitator, that's great, but make sure that you are not just, coordinating the team. You are actually contributing and making the team better, even in the facilitation. Content contribution can be definitely helpful, how we make the idea stronger, better, so that the output is going to be obviously, have sound judgment, make for a really strong experience, because this is what this, learning opportunity that Wharton is asking you guys to work through. So they both are important. I wouldn't necessarily look at it and saying this is the one that you have to work through more. It is really a balance of the two, and make sure that you emphasize the one that you are more naturally in, but recognize that it's how you show up in that actual environment that makes a huge difference. All right, I think that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. We will be hosting another Wharton TBD specific closer to the actual interview invites. So look out for that email. That is going to be an exclusive. It's not going to be on YouTube. So definitely want to make sure that you join our newsletter, and so that you can be on that mailer essentially when it goes out for Wharton TBD. I will see you next week, where we're going to talk about career changes. And so whether you've applied in round 2 and you're thinking about, offers that are going to come up, come out, in March. You're thinking about the next steps. You're thinking about applying to business school. That's going to be a really important session. So register, share it with friends who are going through this process as well. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in a week's time. Hi, I'm Susan Barashai, founder of C Admissions. If you'd like to go deeper into MBA strategy, watch the next video here. And if you want more insights on building a standout application, click here to subscribe.